Section 4.7, solving two-step inequalities. And again, solving two-step inequalities is basically the same as solving equations. Same process, with one exception. Okay, so let's just do an example since we kind of already know the process, right? So the first thing we want to do is we know we have to do two different operations. And that's why it's called a two-step solution, right? So the first step is to get the constants over to the other side of the inequality sign, right? Because remember, our goal is to get the variable all by itself. And so in order to do that, we need to get rid of that 5. All right, so since it's adding 5, we need to subtract 5 from both sides. So then our inequality becomes 3x is greater than 2 minus 5 is a negative 3, right? Okay, now we're going to do this second step. Okay, we're going to note two things. One, this is multiplication, correct? Negative 3 times x. So we know we're going to have to divide to isolate the variable x. The other thing we want to make note of is, what is the sign in front of the 3? It's a negative, right? So negative 3 is the coefficient of the variable x. And remember last section in 4.6, we talked about how if that coefficient is negative, we need to flip our inequality sign, right? So we need to flip that. Okay, since I said it was a multiplication, we know we need to divide both sides by negative 3, right? So negative 3 divided by negative 3 is the same as just 1. So there's our x. And then negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. So our very tight solution is x is less than 1. All right, so let's look at that on the number line. Here's 1. In which direction is less than? It's to the left. So our arrow goes all the way to the left. All right. So our first step was to get rid of that 5. Our second step was to get rid of that negative 3, right? And this one was special because the 3 is negative, which is the coefficient for that variable. So since we divided by a negative to get our solution, we had to flip the inequality sign. Okay. Here is another one we want to do. With this one, our first step is to get this 1/2, to get it out of this side of the inequality. So we're going to add 1/2 to both sides. So then our inequality becomes x divided by 3 is less than or equal to, well, this goes away, right? 1/2 minus 1/2 is 0. And then negative 7/2 plus 1/2 is what? Negative 6/2. But that's the same as negative 3, right? Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. Okay, so this fraction can be simplified down to negative 3. So our inequality now looks like this. So we've gotten rid of the constant. We see here that this says x divided by 3, so that we know our original operation is division. And now we need to do the opposite of that, which is multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 3. Okay, so 3 divided by 3 is 1, so we're just left with the x. This is not negative, it's positive. So we don't need to flip the sign. But then a negative 3 times a 3 is what? Negative 9, because a negative times a positive is a negative. All right, so our solution is x is less than or equal to negative 9. Here's negative 9 on the number line. Since it says less than or equal to, we know we need to fill in our circle, and less than is to the left. Okay, so that is our second example of solving a two-step inequality. And now you can go into your notes and complete the table. There are basically two sections to the table. The first section, you're just going to try to identify the two different math operations you need to use to solve the inequality. You just have to state the different operations. And then the second part of the table has an area where you need to decide whether or not you have to flip the inequality sign when you're solving the equation, the inequality, and if your circle on the number line, when you graph it, if you were to graph it, if it would be open or closed. So you don't have to solve these. You just have to identify if you're flipping, what the circle looks like, and then what the different operations are. All right. Now we're going to try to match a graph to an inequality. And here, sometimes you'll see these types of problems. So here we have a inequality. A negative 7 times parentheses x plus 3 is less than or equal to 28. Okay, so one of these graphs here represents the solution to this. So in theory, you could pick a number on the number line and see if that fits, right? But that's going to be a long process. So instead, you probably want to solve the inequality yourself and then find which graph matches your solution. Okay, so our inequality is this. Just rewriting it from up above. So the first thing we want to do is let's perform the distributive property. So this becomes negative 7x, and then negative 7 times a positive 3 is a negative 21. So that's our new inequality. Okay, this is a two-step. So over here we have subtracting 21. So we want to add 21 to both sides, right? Because the first step is to get rid of that constant. We know 21 minus 21 is 0, so we're just left with 7x. And 21 plus 28 is 49. Okay, now we're going to need to, see, this says negative 7x. That's multiplication. So we need to divide. We need to divide by a negative 7. And we're dividing both sides by negative 7, right? But remember, when the coefficient of the variable is negative, what do we need to do to the sign? We need to flip it. So this becomes, let's see, negative 7 divided by negative 7. That just leaves us with x. Since it's a negative, we need to flip the sign. And then 49 divided by negative 7 is negative 7, because a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and 49 divided by 7 is 7. So this, we believe, is our solution. But now we need to find which graph up above here matches that. Okay, so we know we would find, if we were to do it ourselves, we would find negative 7, right? On the number line. And we would put in a filled in circle, right? Because this is greater than or equal to. And let's see, all 4 of our choices have a filled in circle. So that doesn't eliminate anything. But this says x is greater than or equal to negative 7. And remember, greater than means that it points to the right. Greater than. And then less than points to the left, right? Less than. Okay, so our graph should look like this. So let's find it over here. Here's 7, but it's pointing to the left. Here's 7, but negative 7, but pointing to the left. Here's negative 7 and pointing to the right. And this is the one we want. So our answer is B. This matches our solution. Okay, so now you need to do 2 practice problems in your notes. All right, so I will run through part of the practice problems and you can just check to make sure that you're on the right track. So this first one, 9 is our constant and we need to remove it from this side of the equation. So let's subtract 9 from this side and let's subtract 9 from this side. That looks funny though, right? Looks like I'm dividing. So let's do this. Minus 9, minus 9. So then 9 minus 9 is 0. So we're left with negative 5c is greater than negative 16 minus 9 is a negative 25, right? Okay, so what is the coefficient of the variable c? Is it positive or is it negative? It's negative. So what do you need to do to your inequality sign? You're going to have to flip it. And you're going to have to divide both sides by negative 5. So this should be c is less than something. Okay, and then you'll need to make sure you graph it on the number line. And remember, less than points to the left. Okay, this other one. 1/2 plus a divided by 4 is greater than or equal to negative 1/2. Okay, well, here's our constant. Let's subtract it so that we can start to isolate the variable. So 1/2 minus 1/2 is 0. So we're just left with a divided by 4 is greater than or equal to, what's 1/2 minus 1/2? It's negative 1, right? So now look at your variable. Look at your coefficient. Is it positive or negative? It's positive. So we will not be flipping the sign. So your solution should be a is greater than or equal to something. And then you will graph that on the number line. All right. And that is the end of 4.7.